Good evening, ma'am. I welcome Dr. P.K. Mishra, Additional Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, members NDMA, Ms. Rajni Sekri Sibal, Additional Secretary, Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, and Shri Sanjay Kumar, DG NDRF. Sir, on the occasion of the 14th Formation Day of NDMA today, the role of early warning in disaster management was discussed in great detail. We have had some wonderful presentations from different stakeholder organizations, state governments, and the civil society. I am sure that these deliberations will go a long way in improving our early warning mechanisms. May I now request Shri R.K. Jain, Member NDMA, to welcome Dr. P.K. Mishra. Thank you, sir. Now, I request Shri Kamal Kishore, Member NDMA, to summarize the day's proceedings.
A very good afternoon to you. I think the day's proceedings were very rich, so perhaps it's not possible to do a comprehensive summary. That would take too much time. So I would rather do it in a manner that it just provides some key highlights from the four technical sessions that we had. I think I should start by quoting the Minister of State this morning when basically he highlighted the importance of succeeding on disaster risk reduction in India. He highlighted the enormity of the problem we have. He highlighted how many parts of the country are becoming more risky, more disaster prone. And his line was that if India doesn't succeed, the world will not succeed in disaster risk reduction. The other key feature of the event today was that we branched out from the core disaster risk management organizations to include other ministries, other departments that have a key role in the different dimensions of early warning systems for different hazards. So we had representation from IMD, quite expected, ISRO, Media, Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, and other departments and agencies, international organizations. So it really highlights that this is not really a problem of NDMA or NDRF or MHA alone or NIDM. It is really a cross-sectoral work which requires broader partnership. We also kept our ear to the ground. Rather than having an ivory tower discussion, we had very good cases, very good experiences, challenges reflected from a number of states, including some grassroots organizations. We had heard from Kerala, Andhra Pradesh, UP, Bihar, Tamil Nadu, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a few. So very sort of grounded in reality sort of a discussion. We started the day with focus on cyclone. Any discussion on cyclone early warning system cannot happen without the memory of what happened a year ago in Kerala in terms of cyclone Oki, when we had challenges in serving the needs of the fishermen. We heard from the DG IMD about the work that has been done over the last several years on cyclone early warning from a technical meteorological point of view. There are two things which basically stand out from his presentation without really getting into the technical nitty-gritties. The first thing which really stands out is how interdependent we are with the global hydrometeorological system. The weather and climate systems do not respect national boundaries. They are global systems. Atmosphere is around the entire Earth. So in order to be able to run models, we receive data from others, and we also give data to the others. So I think that appreciation was really stark in his presentation, codependence with the international system. The other point which was very stark, and this especially in the context of a situation where increasingly private players are getting into forecasting and warning and trying to claim space. There he basically highlighted that there is no substitute to having excellent observational network. And he highlighted the example of Cyclone Kyant, where because we have good observations on the ocean, not just in the atmosphere, we are able to run coupled ocean atmosphere models, which basically was able to tell us that the hurricane Kyant was actually going to weaken. And as opposed to other forecasters, IMD was insisting that, we have better observations to run our models and we can say with confidence. And in case of Andhra Pradesh, unnecessary evacuation was avoided because there was a confident forecast based on good observations that the cyclone approaching the Andhra coast is actually going to weaken. We heard from ISRO. We heard about the space assets we have that we use for communication, for navigation, and for remote sensing. All the three kinds of satellites, the space assets we have some or the other role in early warning systems. We heard about much awaited NAVIC system, which will have huge, enormous coverage. It will be based on India's own GPS. And one key feature for me about NAVIC is that while it will meet the early warning needs, it will also serve other needs of the fishermen. For example, it will guide them to where they should go for large fish catch, when they are approaching the international waters and they should be not crossing that boundary in the sea. I think that's a very good thing. If any system is going to be used only once in a blue moon when a disaster occurs, it's very likely that when it happens, it will be found wanting. I mean, that's the example which we had in 70s and 80s about cyclone shelters, and hence we made the cyclone shelters multi-purpose so that it is something which is actually being practiced and used and is available when it is needed. We heard in that context the innovation that is being done in Tamil Nadu in terms of the last mile connectivity being ensured by them. Very interesting presentation on the perspective of the fishermen who go to the high seas. It is very stark to know that if they are out for 25 to 40 days, they fish only for about 9 days. Most of the time they're going out in the sea and returning, and at a very slow speed. So how would they act in such a situation on early warning is a big question. And of course, many issues with basic safety of boats, basic safety, equipment on the boat, design of the boats, and so on. After cyclones, we turned over the discussion to lightning and thunderstorms. Very, very challenging area because lightning, unlike other hazards, is a very highly localized phenomena. We may know a general area where lightning is going to occur, but it happens in a specific point. So how do we actually make localized forecasts? And one very interesting observation, both by the colleague from Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology as well as colleague from Andhra Pradesh, that number of lightning strikes over the subcontinent seem to be increasing over the last 10 years, and there is evidence for that. This, coupled with the fact that we are losing hundreds of people to lightning every year, means that it really has to be a priority. And it is going to be a big challenge to set up an effective early warning system for lightning in the country. There were issues of data integration. Not everybody needs to collect their own data. If Air Force is collecting data, integrate that. IATM is collecting data, integrate that. IMD is collecting data, integrate that. Rather than being very sort of possessive about the data each institution is collecting, we really need to integrate. The work that IITM has done in Maharashtra is soon going to be upscaled in India. There are different modes of communication and dissemination that are being tried. Of course, all of this needs to rest on good awareness among people and protective actions that have to be taken by people who are exposed to lightning. The other thing which was very interesting in this session was that we have to look at linkages between different hazards. So heat waves, thunderstorm, lightning, there is some pattern to them. There is some linkages between them, and we can begin to take a more, if I can find my notes, we can begin to take a more integrated multi-hazard approach. Then finally, in the third session, we had discussion on some cross-cutting issues that impinge upon the effectiveness of early warning systems. We heard UP's experience in operationalizing early warning systems, particularly for floods. In one particular district, they have trained something like 6,000 volunteers. Multiply that with the number of districts in UP, and that's really impressive. We heard about NDMA work on thunderstorm and lightning guidelines. Dr. Anshu Sharma basically turned the whole thing upside down by saying that the early warning paradigm that was there 20 years ago is changing very rapidly. Information is hyper-local. People who are consumers of information are also producers of information, whether actively or passively. He gave specific examples of that. He talked about the work they did in collaboration with NDMA on pilot work on disaster information volunteers and how such a system can really enhance our reach in terms of reaching the most vulnerable in the remotest of areas. We heard from the press secretary to the President of Republic of India about how do we work with media. How do we make sure that media is a partner and not an adversary? And his key message was, don't hide, talk to the media. Make them your ally. They are, appeal to their hearts. They are also in the situation that you are in. They are also facing deadlines. So having a media strategy before a disaster occurs, and he emphatically said that it is possible to have a media strategy before a disaster occurs, is absolutely critical to that. Having spokespersons assigned, having frequently asked questions designed beforehand, having a media landscape of what are the media outlets in different parts of the country, and what is the right media outlet to approach to push what kind of messaging is the key thing. Then we had a very interesting presentation by the co-chair about the whole issue of accessibility for persons with disabilities and how it really has to be integral to whatever evacuation planning we do, whatever disaster risk management work we do. And finally, we heard about the big challenge of setting up a national disaster database, a seamless system which captures data on all aspects of disaster losses from ground up to the national level, the challenges in it and what it would take to do that. Dr. Pawan Singh talked about it in fair bit of detail, which is going to be one of the challenges for not just NDMA, but also for our colleagues in the states as well as in the districts. With that, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for running us through the issues that were discussed today with such finis. I'm sure everyone present here would have benefited from the apt recap. Today, NDMA is releasing a study report on 2017 Gujarat floods. This study was taken up to document the best practices and lessons learned by Gujarat during last year's floods. This study also makes recommendations for strengthening institutional arrangements towards improving the state's resilience further. I request Dr. P.K. Mishra to please unveil the report. Thank you, sir. May I now also request you to deliver the valedictory address?
Members of NDMA, Additional Secretary MHA, Director General NDRF, colleagues from Government of India, state governments, and state disaster management authorities. I am delighted to be here with all of you to mark the 14th formation day of the NDMA, an institution that I was associated with in its early days and have been interacting ever since. I remember those early days when NDMA didn't have a building of its own and started from a hotel and all that, and how the guideline that NDMA should prepare guidelines were conceptualized, even whether to have, what should be the that time the term NDRF was also not there, whether to have something like NDRF and some volunteer like other countries. So it is very nostalgic to remember all those early days. And now to see NDMA well established and playing an important role, not only nationally and being acclaimed even outside, is really very heartening. It is not an easy task to keep the focus of an organization, its partners and stakeholders on holistic disaster reduction as opposed to only response. The expediency of immediate disaster response always trumps the long-term concern of disaster risk reduction. Disasters are seen as interruptions to the development process, and disaster reduction is only an add-on activity as opposed to something that should be integral to our development. In other words, in spite of all our talk about prevention, mitigation, and preparedness for quite some time, the focus is mostly on response. And when we talk about disaster management, normally people think in terms of response, whereas we need to have clear focus. In fact, it should be a part of our development activities to incorporate risk reduction measures. In this context, I would like to commend NDMA for its untiring efforts on all aspects of disaster risk reduction. Your work in this is an investment for our future, to make the future safer. And I am glad to note that NDMA has chosen a theme for today's workshop that is always very vital and topical. Although early warning system is perhaps the oldest theme in disaster management, it is one of the most challenging. We have been struggling with that for quite some time. From the summary, it is evident that you have discussed it in a very holistic manner. While summarizing the proceedings of various sessions. Mr. Kamal Kishore gave an example of how to have a warning system for fishermen. He mentioned that he referred to one presentation that they are on the sea for 15 days, 20 days and all that. And how to give them timely warning is still a challenge. I remember in the year 1998 when the Kandla cyclone, and that time we had a lot of experience because of our failure to take effectively the evacuation measures because there were a lot of unpredictable movement of the cyclone. But the next year, the 1999, there was another cyclone. And there, because of very timely, effective action and timely evacuation, the death was very, very minimal. However, it was discovered after a day or two when the cyclone totally dissipated that a lot of dead bodies were discovered from the sea and mostly of the fishermen. And even those days, we thought how to go about, how to give timely warning to the fishermen. That time there was no mobile phone, of course. Some satellite telephone were also not very common, and